In the glittering ballroom of Manhattan's most exclusive hotel, Olivia Whitaker stood frozen as her husband Damian raised his glass and sneered, "Pour it all over her, Victoria. Show everyone who really belongs by my side." Cocktail cascaded down her pregnant belly while 800 guests laughed and filmed. What Damian didn't know, her billionaire brothers were already watching, and the night was about to end him. Before we begin, tell us where you're watching from. And if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe. The grand ballroom of the Plaza Hotel glowed under crystal chandeliers, but outside the tall windows, a late autumn rain fell softly against the glass, blurring the lights of Manhattan into gentle streaks of gold. Olivia Whitaker stood near the center of the room, one hand resting lightly on the gentle swell of her 6-month belly. She was 30, fair-skinned, with long, wavy chestnut hair that caught the warm light like polished wood. Her emerald satin gown flowed over her frame with quiet grace, the deep V-neck and sheer sleeves chosen weeks ago in a moment of quiet hope. Her eyes, large, hazel, usually steady, now held the faint weariness of a woman who had learned to carry disappointment without complaint. She smiled at passing guests, the smile practiced and polite, but her breathing came a little shallow tonight. Damian Sinclair moved through the crowd like a man who owned every inch of the floor. 35, tall at 6'1", athletic build beneath a charcoal gray suit cut sharp enough to cut glass. His short dark brown hair was swept back neatly, face clean-shaven, skin tanned from too many weekends in places people envied. He carried himself with the easy confidence of someone who had climbed fast and believed the ladder would never end. When he laughed, the sound was bright but edged, like sunlight on a blade. Beside him walked Victoria Langford, 32, light olive skin glowing under the lights, sleek black hair gathered in a low chignon. Her black chiffon dress hugged a slim, toned figure. The knee-length cut and sheer sleeves spoke of control, of knowing exactly how much to reveal. She held a wide crystal cocktail glass, the liquid inside catching red from the overhead lights. Her smile was practiced too, but sharper, more certain. The quartet had just finished a slow waltz when Damian raised his glass. The room quieted, expecting a toast. Instead, he turned to Victoria and said low enough for the nearest tables to hear, but clear enough to carry, "Go on, pour it all over her. Show everyone who really belongs by my side." The words landed like stones in still water. Victoria hesitated only a second, then she lifted the glass high. Olivia's eyes widened. She took one small step back, palm flattening protectively over her child. "Damian," she whispered, voice so soft it barely reached him. "Please." He did not look at her. He watched Victoria's arm move. The cocktail fell in a cold, sweet arc, cranberry and vodka and melting ice, splashing across Olivia's hair, streaming down her face, soaking the satin until it clung dark and heavy to her skin. The gown she had spent 3 weeks choosing now looked like something discarded. Guests gasped, then laughed, nervous at first, then louder, phones rising like torches in the dim light. Someone clapped, another cheered. The sound rolled across the room, a wave she could not outrun. Olivia stood motionless. The cold liquid trickled inside her collar, down her spine. Her baby kicked once, hard, as if in protest. She tasted salt. Tears or the drink, she could not tell. Her chest rose and fell in shallow breaths. She wanted to run, to disappear into the rain outside, but her legs would not move. Instead, she looked at Damian, searching the face she had once believed in. He met her gaze. For a moment, something flickered there. Regret, perhaps, or only irritation at being inconvenienced. Then it vanished. He lifted his own glass again. "To new beginnings," he said, voice loud and certain. Olivia's lips parted. "We have a baby coming," she said so quietly only the nearest tables could hear. "I'm your wife." Damian laughed, short and sharp. "Wife? You were a stepping stone, Olivia. A way in. Nothing more." The words struck deeper than the drink. She felt them settle somewhere low in her chest, heavy as stone. 5 years of shared mornings, of late-night talks, of believing she had chosen love over safety, gone in one sentence. She wrapped both arms around her belly now, as though she could shield the child from the sound of it. Around her, the laughter continued, phone still recording. No one stepped forward. No hand reached out. She was alone in a room of 800 people. Yet in that long, terrible silence inside her own head, something small and steady began to stir. Not anger. Not yet. Something quieter. A memory of 3 boys who once promised her the world would never be allowed to hurt her. A memory she had pushed away for years. She lifted her chin, just a fraction. The rain tapped against the windows like a patient hand waiting to be let in. Rain still tapped against the tall windows of the plaza, softer now, like fingers drumming a patient rhythm on old oak. Inside the ballroom, the laughter had faded to murmurs, but Olivia remained where the cocktail had fallen, the wet satin heavy against her skin. She closed her eyes. The cold seeped deeper, carrying her back 7 years. She saw herself at 23, standing behind the polished bar of a small downtown lounge called The Lantern. The air smelled of bourbon and lemon peel. She wore a simple black apron over jeans, her chestnut hair tied back in a loose knot. Damian Sinclair had come in on a rainy Tuesday evening, 28 then, shoulders already broad from restless energy. His dark brown hair was damp, his smile quick and warm. He ordered a whiskey neat, then asked her name. When she told him, he repeated it softly, as though tasting it. They talked until closing. He spoke of dreams, big ones, the kind that burn in young men who grew up with too little. She listened. Something in his voice felt like possibility. Weeks later, she brought him to the Whitaker family house upstate. The long dining table gleamed under candlelight. Sebastian, 32, sat at the head, his broad frame filling the chair, eyes steady but guarded. Theodore, 30, leaned forward, sleeves rolled, voice gentle when he asked questions. Harrison, 28, watched quietly from the side, fingers tapping a slow pattern on the wood. Damian spoke easily, charming them with plans and numbers. Olivia felt proud. She had opened a door for him. She introduced him to contacts, to quiet dinners where deals were whispered over coffee. Within a year, his company took shape. Luxury properties, off-market listings, the kind of work that made people whisper his name. But the brothers saw shadows. Sebastian called her aside one evening in the study, the fire low, the smell of cedar smoke thick. He moves too fast, Liv. There are gaps in the numbers. Theodore added softer, "We just want you safe." Harrison said nothing at first, only looked at her with that quiet sorrow he carried since their parents' accident. Olivia felt the old walls close in, the same walls that had wrapped her too tightly after the car crash when she was 10. She remembered nights when Sebastian came home exhausted from night shifts he took to keep the house. Theodore reading her textbooks aloud until his voice cracked. Harrison sitting on her bed with dog-eared fairy tales until she slept. They had given her everything, yet the protection felt like a cage. She wanted to breathe her own air. The engagement party arrived on a crisp October evening. Lanterns hung in the garden. Guests laughed under strings of light. Damian stood beside her, hand on her waist. Sebastian rose to speak. His voice was calm, measured. He mentioned the irregularities he had quietly checked. Small things, contracts that did not quite line up. The room stilled. Damian's smile tightened. Olivia felt heat rise in her cheeks. She stepped forward. "If you can't trust my choice," she said, voice trembling but clear, "then maybe you don't belong at my wedding." The words cut deeper than she intended. Sebastian's face changed. Not anger, but a quiet breaking. Theodore looked down at his plate. Harrison turned away. She left that night with Damian. They eloped 3 weeks later in a small courthouse upstate. No family. Just the two of them and a clerk who smiled politely. She told herself it was freedom. Now, standing in the ballroom with punch drying sticky on her skin, Olivia felt the weight of those choices settle like wet wool. She had traded 3 men who had raised her for a man who had never truly seen her. The laughter around her had stopped, but the silence inside was louder. She opened her eyes. The rain had eased to a drizzle. Somewhere beyond the windows, the city waited. A small, steady thought rose through the ache. Perhaps the brothers had never stopped waiting either. Olivia still stood in the same spot, arms 10 feet away from the door, her eyes fixed on the man who had just entered the room. Olivia still stood in the same spot, arms wrapped around herself, the damp gown cold against her ribs. She breathed slowly. Each breath carried her further into the years she had tried to leave behind. After the engagement party, the silence between her and her brothers grew like ivy on an old fence. Slow, persistent, impossible to ignore. She changed her number the next week. Emails went unanswered. The family house upstate, with its wide porch and the creak of familiar floorboards, became a place she no longer visited. She told herself it was necessary. Freedom demanded distance. Damian moved them into a sleek apartment overlooking the Hudson, all glass and clean lines. Mornings smelled of fresh coffee and new paint. Evenings were quiet, filled with his plans and her quiet listening. She found work as a freelance consultant. Small projects, enough to feel useful. She cooked dinners she hoped he would notice. She waited for the day he would say, "You were right to choose this." But the signs came quietly at first. A late-night call he took in the hallway, voice low and careful. Trips to Miami that stretched from 3 days to 10. Receipts in his coat pocket for dinners she had not shared. She asked once, gently. He smiled, touched her cheek, said, "Business, Liv. You know how it is." She wanted to believe him. She needed to believe him. The child growing inside her made doubt feel like a betrayal of them both. Nights were the hardest. She would lie awake beside him, listening to his even breathing and feel the old ache return. She remembered Sebastian's face the night she left, the way his shoulders sagged, not from anger but from a deeper kind of hurt. Theodore's voice, soft and steady, asking her to stay just one more night. Harrison's silence, the way he had turned away without a word, his back straight but his hands clenched at his sides. They had never raised their voices. They had only loved her the only way they knew how, completely, without reserve. And she had walked away from it, convinced that love looked like chains. She tried to fill the empty spaces. She read books on motherhood, traced the baby's kicks with gentle fingers, whispered names into the dark. She told herself this was enough. A husband who provided, a home they had built together. Yet every unanswered text from an old friend, every holiday that passed without a card from upstate, carved a little deeper. The isolation settled like dust on furniture, unseen at first, then impossible to ignore. She began to wonder if independence always carried this price. One evening, 5 months pregnant, she sat alone on the balcony, the river lights shimmering below. Damian was away again. The wind carried the faint smell of rain-soaked asphalt. She placed a hand on her belly and felt the small, insistent movement inside. A promise. A future. She closed her eyes and let the tears come, quiet and unhurried. Not for Damian, not even for herself. For the 3 men who had once braided her hair, taught her to ride a bike, sat with her through nightmares. For the family she had pushed away to prove she did not need them. In the stillness, a small truth took root. She had not escaped the cage. She had only traded one for another. Yet somewhere beneath the ache, a quiet voice whispered that doors left open never truly close. The ballroom lights dimmed slightly as the quartet paused between pieces. A hush fell over the room, not from the spilled drink, but from something heavier entering through the tall double doors. Rain had begun again outside, soft and steady, tapping like a quiet heartbeat against the glass. 3 men stepped inside. They moved without hurry, yet the air seemed to thicken around them. Sebastian Whitaker led, 39 now, broad-shouldered and tall at 6'2", his black bespoke suit fitting like a second skin. His dark brown hair showed faint silver at the temples. His face, clean-shaven, carried the lines of a man who had shouldered too much too young. His eyes, deep brown, steady, held no anger, only a quiet, unshakable resolve. Behind him came Theodore, 37, lean and tall, navy suit tailored with care, his dark blonde hair combed neatly to the side. He walked with the calm of someone who had learned patience the hard way. Harrison followed last, 35, light charcoal suit open at the collar, his modern dark brown hair slightly tousled, a phone held loosely in one hand. His expression was calm, almost gentle, but his eyes missed nothing. They crossed the floor in silence. Guests parted without being asked. Phones lowered. Laughter died completely. The three men carried the weight of years spent building something larger than themselves. Quiet power, the kind that does not need to shout. Sebastian reached Olivia first. She had not moved since the cocktail fell. Her gown clung wet and heavy. Strands of chestnut hair stuck to her cheeks. He did not speak at once. He simply shrugged off his suit jacket, warm from his body, lined with faint cedar from the coat closet at home, and draped it over her shoulders. The wool settled soft and heavy, carrying the scent she had known since childhood. Clean cotton, old books, the faint trace of pipe tobacco he had given up years ago. Olivia's breath caught. She looked up into his face. His eyes softened, the same way they had when he carried her to bed as a child after nightmares. "You're still our little sister," he said, voice low, meant only for her. "The one we promised to protect forever." The words landed gently, like rain on dry earth. She felt them soak in, loosening something knotted deep inside. Theodore stepped to her other side, his hand resting lightly on her elbow, steady, careful, the same touch he had used when teaching her to ride a bicycle 20 years earlier. Harrison stood close, phone now pocketed, his gaze sweeping the room once before settling on her. No words from him yet, only the quiet certainty that he was here. Sebastian guided her toward the doors. She walked between them, the jacket warm against the chill that had settled in her bones. Guests watched in stunned silence. Some looked away in shame. Others stared openly, as though witnessing something rare and private. Damian still stood near the center, glass in hand, talking to a small knot of people. He had not yet turned, he had not yet seen. Outside the ballroom, in the carpeted hallway, the air was cooler, scented with polished wood and distant rain. A private car waited at the side entrance, black, discreet, engine idling low. A doctor Olivia did not recognize stood beside it, coat buttoned against the damp night, medical bag in hand. Sebastian nodded to her once. The doctor stepped forward, gentle but professional. Olivia paused at the threshold. She looked back through the open doors. The ballroom lights glowed golden behind them. Damian had finally noticed. His posture changed, shoulders stiffening, smile fading. He took one step forward, then stopped. The three brothers stood between him and her, not moving, not speaking, just present, solid, unyielding. In that moment, Olivia felt the old ache shift. Not gone, not yet, but lighter. As though a hand long held out had finally been taken. She stepped into the rain-scented night, wrapped in her brother's jacket, the promise of protection no longer a memory but something real again. The private car idled in the side alley behind the plaza, rain drumming softly on the black roof like distant fingers on a piano lid. Inside, the leather seats smelled faintly of polish and old wool. Warm air circulated quietly. Olivia sat in the middle, Sebastian's jacket still draped over her shoulders, the damp gown beneath it beginning to dry in slow patches. Her breathing came easier now, though her hands remained clasped over her belly, protective and small. Sebastian settled beside her on the left, broad frame filling the space without crowding. Theodore took the right, his navy suit jacket open, sleeves rolled once at the cuffs. Harrison sat facing them on the jump seat, knees close together, phone resting face down on his thigh. The doctor had checked her quickly, pulse steady, baby moving normally, then stepped outside to give them privacy. The windows fogged at the edges from their quiet breathing. Sebastian spoke first, voice low and measured. "We saw it all, Liv. A friend of yours, Sophie, sent us the live stream. She never stopped watching out for you." He paused, letting the words settle. The video spread fast. Millions have seen it by now. Olivia's eyes lifted to his. She pictured the ballroom again. The laughter, the phones raised like torches. Her throat tightened. Harrison leaned forward slightly. "The room panicked when they realized who we were," he said, calm as ever. "They're still processing what happened in there." Theodore reached across and covered her hand with his own. Warm, steady, the same hand that had once held hers during thunderstorms. "We respected your choice," he said softly. "5 years ago, when you walked away, we didn't follow. We thought pushing would only prove your fears right, that we wanted to control you. So we stayed back. His voice caught, just a fraction. But we never stopped loving you. Not one day. Olivia felt the words land somewhere deep and tender, like rain finding dry soil after a long drought. She looked at each of them in turn. Sebastian's eyes carried the weight of years spent carrying too much. Theodore's held quiet sorrow, the kind that comes from loving without being able to help. Harrison's were steady, thoughtful, the same eyes that had once read her fairy tales until her eyelids grew heavy. Harrison turned his phone over, screen dark. "We kept tabs," he said, "not to interfere, just to know you were safe. Investigators, quiet ones, enough to see the patterns, late nights, trips that didn't add up. We waited for the day you might need us." He paused. Today was that day. Olivia's chest rose and fell. She thought of the empty holidays, the unanswered calls she had never made. Then Harrison spoke again, softer. "Every year on your birthday, we sent something. Through Sophie. A necklace one year engraved with Mom and Dad's names. A book the next. Small things. We never signed them. Never asked you to respond. We just wanted you to know we were still here. If you ever looked back." The words broke something open inside her. She felt the ache rise fresh, not from the humiliation, but from the gentle, persistent love she had tried to outrun. Tears slipped down her cheeks, warm against the drying cold on her skin. She reached up and touched the chain at her throat, the one she had worn for years without knowing its origin. Now she understood. It had been theirs all along. Sebastian leaned closer. "We're sorry we didn't fight harder to stay in your life," he said. "But we're here now, and we have everything we need to make this right." Olivia nodded once, small and certain. The rain outside eased to a whisper. In the quiet of the car, surrounded by the men who had raised her, she felt the first faint stirring of forgiveness, not just for them, but for herself. She was not alone. She never had been. The car moved slowly through the rain-slick streets of Manhattan, tires hissing on wet asphalt. Streetlights blurred into long golden streaks across the windows. Inside, the quiet held a different weight now. Less grief, more gathering strength. Olivia sat between her brothers, Sebastian's jacket still warm around her shoulders. The heater breathed soft warmth against her skin. No one spoke for several minutes. Only the steady rhythm of the wipers and the faint patter of rain on the roof. Harrison broke the silence first. He turned his phone screen toward them, the glow pale against the dark leather. "It's done," he said quietly. "The main investor, Pembroke, pulled out 15 minutes ago. We reminded him of the shipping contracts we control. He didn't argue." Sebastian nodded once. Theodore added softer. "The internal report went live 10 minutes later. Fraud, insider trading, concealed defects in every major deal. Bank accounts are frozen pending IRS review. His board is already calling emergency meetings." Olivia listened without moving. She pictured Damian in the ballroom, glass still in hand, the smile frozen on his face as the first messages arrived. The empire he had built on borrowed trust, on her introductions, on lies polished to shine, crumbling now like dry leaves underfoot. She felt no rush of triumph, only a deep, quiet sadness for the man she had once loved, for the dreams they had shared in that small apartment years ago, for the child inside her who would never know the father she had hoped he would be. Yet beneath the sadness lay something firmer, a recognition. She had carried this child alone in spirit long before tonight. She had learned to stand when no one stood beside her. The thought settled like a stone in still water, ripples spreading outward, steady and sure. Harrison continued, voice even. "There's more. Miami. He has a second family there. 2 children, 3 and 5. The marriage predates yours. Bigamy. We've had the records for years." Theodore's hand tightened briefly on hers. Victoria helped him hide assets, offshore accounts. She advised on the paperwork. The Bar Association will have the file by morning. Disbarment is certain. Olivia closed her eyes. The names, the dates, the hidden lives, they landed not as shocks, but as pieces of a puzzle she had sensed but never dared assemble. She breathed in the scent of wet wool and cedar from the jacket. The car slowed at a red light. Raindrops raced each other down the glass. Something stirred in her then. Not anger. Resolve. She opened her eyes. "Take me back," she said, voice low but clear. Sebastian looked at her. "Liv, just to the doors," she said. "I need to see his face one last time." The car turned back. When they reached the side entrance, Olivia stepped out first. Rain fell cool on her hair. She walked to the glass doors leading into the ballroom's foyer. Through the panes, she saw Damian, still in the center, face ashen now, phone clutched in one hand as though it might save him. He looked up. Their eyes met across the glass. She did not step inside. She simply stood there, hand resting on the swell of her belly. "You thought I was weak," she said, loud enough for him to hear through the door. "But I've been stronger than you ever knew. Carrying this child without you, standing when you tried to make me small." Damian opened his mouth. His voice cracked when he spoke. "Liv, I grew up with nothing. I had to fight for every—" She cut him off gently. "You used your past to excuse betrayal. I used mine to rise." A woman in the crowd, a silver-haired executive in a dark green gown, stood slowly. "I've been there," she said, voice carrying across the hushed room. "Don't let him win." Another guest nodded. Then another. The murmurs grew. A few clapped, tentative at first, then steadier. The sound rolled toward Damian like a slow tide. He looked around, suddenly small in the vast room. Olivia turned away from the glass. Rain dripped from her hair onto the stone steps. She walked back to the car. Her brothers waited, doors open. She slid inside without a word. The engine purred to life again. In the quiet that followed, she felt the child move, a small, insistent kick, a reminder. Life went on. Love endured. And sometimes the greatest strength was simply choosing to stand. She rested her head against Sebastian's shoulder. The rain sang softly on the roof. Forgiveness, she realized, was not forgetting. It was remembering and choosing to walk forward anyway. The rain had softened to a fine mist by the time the black sedans arrived. Their headlights cut through the wet night like quiet lanterns. Inside the plaza's side entrance, the ballroom doors stood open. Olivia sat in the car, wrapped in Sebastian's jacket, the wool still holding faint warmth. The air outside smelled of damp stone and distant exhaust. She watched through the tinted window as uniformed officers moved in steady lines, their footsteps muffled on the carpet. 2 FBI agents entered first. Dark suits, calm faces, badges catching the light. They walked straight to Damian. He stood frozen near the center table, phone limp in his hand. The lead agent spoke low words she could not hear. Handcuffs clicked. Damian looked up once, eyes searching for her through the glass. She met his gaze without flinching. No anger rose in her chest. Only a quiet pity. For the man he had become. For the choices that had led here. Victoria followed moments later. Wrists bound. Her black chiffon dress creased, makeup smudged. She did not look back. The crowd watched in near silence. A few guests nodded slowly. The woman in the green gown placed a hand on the arm of the person beside her. The applause that had begun earlier swelled again. Soft, steady, like rain on leaves. Sebastian leaned forward from the driver's seat. "You were never alone, Liv," he said. His voice was low, almost a whisper. "Not once. We were 8 blocks away. Always." Theodore reached over and squeezed her fingers. Harrison looked at her with that quiet certainty he had carried since boyhood. Olivia felt the words settle deep. Tears came again. Not from pain, but from the gentle weight of being seen. She had spent years believing she had to choose between love and freedom. Now she understood. Real love did not demand the choice. It waited, patient, unchanging. The car pulled away as the officers led Damian and Victoria into the night. Olivia rested her head against the window. The city lights slid past in soft streaks. She thought of the small apartment she had shared with Damian, the one with the narrow balcony and the river view. She thought of the nights she had waited for him to come home. She thought of the child she carried, who had never known anything but her heartbeat. A small smile touched her lips. She was going home, not to the glass apartment, but to the house upstate, to the porch with the creaking swing, to the people who had never stopped leaving the light on. 6 months passed like seasons turning. The baby came on a clear spring morning. Charlotte Rose Whitaker arrived in a private room filled with soft light. Olivia held her daughter close, breathing in the scent of new skin and milk. Sebastian stood at the bedside, eyes bright. Theodore sat in the chair, hands clasped. Harrison leaned against the wall, arms folded, a rare smile breaking across his face. 3 uncles, 3 men who had once carried her through childhood, now gathered around a new life. They cried quietly, unashamed. Olivia looked at them and felt the last pieces of old hurt loosen and fall away. She reached up and fastened the necklace, the one engraved with her parents' names. It rested cool against her skin. Later, when the room grew still, she whispered to the sleeping child in her arms, "Sweetheart, family isn't perfect. It makes mistakes. It lets you go when you need to fly. But it waits. It waits with open arms. And when you come back, it loves you like you never left. Never lose your worth for anyone, my girl. You are enough. Always." The words hung in the quiet air like a promise. Outside the window, spring sunlight touched the budding trees. A new day had begun. As the years soften our steps and the quiet evenings grow longer, remember this: true family waits with open arms, even after we've wandered far. In our later years, loneliness and illness may whisper, but love, patient, enduring, never truly leaves. Share your own story below. Comment who showed up for you. Like and subscribe for more tales of hope. May God bless you with health, comfort, and loved ones near. You are never alone.